Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends and colleagues. Welcome to the third Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Memorial Lecture on the archaeology and deep history of Africa. Be aware that this is being recorded, so speak in sotto voce, I guess, if you want to pass disparaging remarks about me, or hopefully not our speaker. So this is an annual event held in memory of Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer, a passionate supporter of educational opportunity, sustainable ecology, and the conservation of African environments, and who had a very long-standing interest in human evolution and African paleoanthropology. And it's wonderful to see so many of you here in person today. And I know that there are possibly upwards of 3 times as many registered for this talk joining us online. And I hope they're all able to hear me and the speaker, and were able to access the Zoom link. I'm also delighted to welcome today's lecturer, Dr. Amanuel Beyin, to Cambridge. Dr. Beyin is an associate professor of anthropology based at the Department of Anthropology, the University of Louisville, Kentucky. And his research spanned the entire breadth of human prehistory, from the first appearance of our lineage in Africa around 2.5 million years ago to the beginnings of food production on the continent, which varies from between 10 and 5,000 years ago. And geographically, his research focuses on East Africa, an area that has been central to understanding the long trajectories of human evolution on the continent, and it will remain so, I think, for decades, well, for eternity, really. I mean, there's a really, I'm not going to extemporize it. Yeah. But I suggest you plot on a map where the centers of human evolution are all positioned by different, the cradles of humankind. There are about 6 or 7 of them now spread across the continent as different countries compete for having this thing. I digress, sorry. Amanuel's research interests encompass understanding the behavioural dimensions of human evolution through the recovery and comparative study of stone tools and the environmental context for hominin dispersal out of Africa, with a focus on understanding the range of habitats that they occupied and the conditions that facilitated their dispersal to other regions. As we will hear today, he is particularly interested in the antiquity, survival and benefits and behavioural manifestations of hominin engagement with coastal ecozones. He has undertaken field research in Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan and Tanzania, and has developed successful projects focused on the Turkana Basin, northern Kenya, where he worked for his doctoral research, and we were very fortunate to have him speak very eloquently about that in a joint African Archaeology Group and Pal-Mizo Group seminar yesterday lunchtime. He's also worked in on the western periphery of the Red Sea in Eritrea and the Sudan in his initial postdoctoral research, and currently is working on the Kilwa coast of southern Tanzania, an area that is perhaps better known archaeologically for the fantastic and very extensive Swahili-era stone town. His research has been funded via grants from, among others, the National Science Foundation, National Geographic, and the Leakey and Venegren Foundations. And his publications include theoretical papers that add perspectives to ongoing debates on hominin dispersal and behavioural developments, and in 2023, he finalised co-editing with 3 colleagues a landmark handbook of Pleistocene archaeology of Africa. It was published by Springer that year and contains some 128 chapters from 279 contributions and ran to 2,291 pages. Quite a remarkable accomplishment, and congratulations on bringing that to publication, Amanuel. And the volume is the first of its kind, and I think is expected to serve as an essential reference for researchers and students of African prehistory for many years to come. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Beyin to present the third Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Memorial Lecture on his topic, Prehistoric Life on Coastal East Africa, Emerging Archaeological Finds and Unfilled Gaps. Amanuel.
Thank you, Paul, for that kind introduction. Sorry, for some reason my voice is a little scratchy. I hope it will go away after I speak a little bit more. But it's a great honor to be here and to be invited to give this distinguished lecture, and had a great time learning about Cambridge. This is my first time to visit Cambridge, so it has been a great time, not only just for coming to give this lecture, but learning about Cambridge, exploring all the amazing campus and all the vibrant neighborhoods. So I'm very thankful, grateful to you, Paul, for inviting me to give this lecture, and all the audience who are here. Thank you so much. So just to set the stage for this talk, I have three major themes that will pretty much fence the scope of this lecture. So this talk is gonna start off, I will start off with a brief highlights of some of the conventional views about the role of seashores in human evolution, including human survival and adaptive radiation. Then I will talk briefly about some of the long-standing gaps in discerning or understanding this relationship, human engagement or early human engagement with shoreline environments. Then the last segment, the largest portion of this talk, will focus on my ongoing work on the coastal periphery of Tanzania, pretty much on the southeast of Tanzania, on the western coastal periphery of the Indian Ocean. So just for a reference, this is Tanzania, and this will be the area, the focal area that I will be telling you about my ongoing work. All right, so seashores or shoreline environments are believed to have played a crucial role in shaping human evolution, providing our ancestors with abundant resources, favorable living conditions, and opportunities for interaction and cultural development. A famous biogeographer/geographer, Carl Saar, once described our relationship or the role of shoreline environments in the following words. Our kind had its origins and earliest home in an interior land. However, the discovery of the sea, whenever it happened, afforded a living beyond that. The seashore, in particular, there is a little some part that I cut. The tidal shore presented the best opportunity to eat, settle, increase, and learn. So this is 1960s. Not everyone agrees with this statement, but views like this really inspired so many generations of research. So I think we should recognize all the statements and views that were expressed before us, even though we may not really think that was the case. Some people may not agree with it, but it's a really powerful statement that inspired and stimulated so much research on the shorelines, along shorelines in general. And research has shown, repeated research has shown that marine foods are good sources of DHA, which stands for docosahexaenoic acid, which is an omega-3 fatty acid. And it forms a primary structural component of the human brain, and is believed to have played an important role in promoting these brain selective genes. And so obviously, if hominins remained engaged with coastal environments or aquatic resource base, the shoreline must have been the interface through which they accessed this valuable resource. So the shorelines stand as ideal and logical targets for archaeological investigation. That's where the evidence of human engagement should exist. In addition, shoreline environments are also believed to have served as conduits or corridors for human interaction, human dispersal, And human interaction entails also humans influencing one another and cultural exchange. And some of the prominent kind of views that people hold about shoreline relations, the role of shorelines in hominin dispersal entailed first migration of our ancestors out of Africa is believed to have been accomplished through one of these shores. I believe it was the western periphery of the Red Sea. But also, some theories suggest that there may have been a direct migration from the southwestern periphery of the Red Sea onto the southwestern periphery of the Arabian Peninsula, directly through the Bab al-Mandeb. Then early humans trekked along the coast, the northern periphery of the Indian Ocean. So there is that. And the entry to Australia definitely involved navigation, right? So if there was navigation, people must have pretty much lingered along the coastlines of either sides, Indonesia as well as Australia. So clearly, we cannot deny the fact that shorelines were really entry points to major land masses. And with that, it must have stimulated important cultural and technological innovations. And the human expansion, the peopling of the America is also believed to have been accomplished through coastal dispersal along this western northeastern periphery of the Pacific Ocean. And so for all these reasons, well, I have one more reason, actually, why shoreline environments should be at the center of our investigation and really keep investigating their role. Another very interesting model that had been around for about more than 20 years now is called coastal oasis model, and this actually inspired my work on the Red Sea. All right, so the model says that during glacial environments, when sea levels drop, some freshwater springs could emerge from this newly exposed coastal gradient. And most water bodies, oceans, seas, receive water, freshwater springs, but we don't see them if it is on a high stand. When the sea level drops, in fact, it removes this hydrostatic pressure, and the water, the fresh water from the water table, adjacent water table, could usually, like continental shelves, have a lot of like rock environments, like places where water could be there. So water reservoir. So these freshwater springs flow at a higher rate because of that removal of the hydrostatic pressure, and they could actually create this coastal oasis, a verdant landscape that could potentially attract human habitation at a time when most interior terrestrial landscapes could be dry/arid. So hominins could be drawn to the coast just to exploit this new oasis environment. So yeah, for this reason, shoreline environments could have also potentially contributed for human survival and served as ecological hotspots. The problem with that is, I'm going to mention it later, but just to give you a heads up, we may not find the archaeological traces associated with this settlement. Once the sea rises, this will be submerged, right? So our best hope is to find human traces formed by or left by people who retreated to the inland once the sea starts to rise. All right, so that's why this near coastal ecozones should be the primary targets, or are expected to capture that human engagement with the aquatic setting. All right, so therefore, by examining the nature and history of hominin engagement with seashores, shoreline seashores, I will use it like interchangeably, but I'm specifically focused on seashores. By really studying, focusing and investing in archaeological research in shoreline environments, we gain deeper insights into how they shape, this dynamic landscape shaped our survival, intelligence, and connection to the natural world. Also, we should always think like, the sea itself inspires people. It's a unique medium that challenges people to think about their overall worldview, overall thinking of the landscape, and it also serves as a boundary. All right. So by serving as boundary, it guides people's movement to certain directions. Long-standing gaps. So these problems, these gaps stem from lack of archaeological work in some target areas. And some of these gaps include the question of how frequently did our ancestors exploit seashores? Was it like episodic? Did humans go to the coast, forage along the coast during specific climatic conditions, or were shoreline environments exploited as part of, habitually as part of the broader landscape? So that question remains, again, unresolved. And another important question that's relevant for our event today, discussion today, is what role did the Eastern African coastal ecozones play in hominin survival and adaptive radiation? This question is relevant because the coastal periphery of East Africa lies along the same region, general region of the source of the richest hominin fossil record and mammalian fossil record. So it should be considered as an important habitat for early humans by virtue of being in the same location. And so this is kind of the underlying question that I would like to contribute to this question. What evidence do we have? What is the emergent evidence? But so far, there hasn't been much. The area has not received the attention that it deserves. And for that, we have this gap, right, of in our knowledge of to what extent this shoreline was important for hominin survival and adaptive radiation in terms of cultural change and appearance, emergence of new behavior. So there are more claims that are limited with limited empirical data, including fossil and archaeology. So these are just kind of few picks of some of the major publications that deal with coastal environment, just really amplify the role of coastal and shoreline environments. But again, in many regions, they fall short of representation or they're not tested in various regions. All right, so another long-standing gap stems from the fact that we have very little understanding of what kind of subsistence model our ancestors really employ when they engage with shoreline seashores or shoreline environments. And generally, human foraging strategy is kind of conceived of as involving like between forager and collector strategies. And forager strategy usually entails the consumer, the foragers, consuming the food where they catch it. And so, for example, if it is caught on the beach and if it is dumped there, all the residue, all the tools that were used there were dumped there, it's unlikely to find any trace of that activity. So by virtue of humans leaving their traces, the evidence of their subsistence activity on the beach, it is pretty much deemed to be lost. Okay? So there is that caveat with forager strategy. And just for a general information, the foraging, the forager strategy is considered to be the primitive or ancestral behavior. We see it in most primates. They follow forager strategy, and for the most part of our history, hominins are believed to have been foragers. So collector strategy is something that came later when we start to have a base camp to where people were bringing food and congregating. So that is the kind of the conclusion. Before I develop my work on the right side, you will see that you cannot recognize me. So in 2005, I did some pilot actualistic study on the beach on the shores of Long Island, New York. So yeah, I was just wondering, what is the hope? Is there any hope to find even sites that are on the beach? Because the site that inspired my work along the rescue coast of Eritrea is named Abdur, and researchers found these artifacts are claimed to be associated with human foraging on the coast, and they're found in this limestone reef. So I was just curious if this can be true. And to kind of create a little case, I went there and dumped a bunch of artifacts along the beach, just away from the cobble area and just on the beach, on the sandy part. And so I left about 50 artifacts, and I came back in a week, and I couldn't find any of them. So pretty much any material, any archaeological residue that's left on the beach is deemed to be lost. And so we have that limitation of accessing the actual behavior or trace of human engagement with coastal or seashores. The problem with the collector strategy is perceived or should be assumed to lend us like more access or more making human subsistence, coastal subsistence more accessible to archaeologists. But the problem is not all regions have these ideal settings for human congregation or for human consumption, ideal settings such as karstic caves where people would bring the food and where they consume it and where it could be preserved. So in open air sites, most food material, and if people are not really doing much or living long on a given landscape, there will be very little chance of finding real archaeological traces. So the lack of this ideal settings, karstic caves along the shorelines of most of Africa has impeded our ability to really discover sites associated with coastal exploitation. So in essence, we can fairly say and safely say that it's not that early humans were not really interested in coastal resources or the aquatic resource base, but there aren't ideal settings that could capture this evidence of that engagement. Otherwise, wherever there are karstic settings, we find evidence of coastal adaptation. You go to South Africa, most of our knowledge of human engagement with coastal habitats come from South Africa, simply because there is ideal setting. There are a bunch of caves along the periphery of South Africa, and you go to North Africa, the same, right? So there are ideal settings. The only well-dated sites in East Africa, Pangaea Saidi, is a cave site. So we see that it is the absence of these ideal settings that could preserve evidence of human engagement with the coast that is limiting our ability to really know and learn about our ancestors' engagement with the coastline. So with that, what would be the best place to look for this evidence of hominin engagement with the seashore? I argue it is this near coastal landscape, okay? So these are the best logical places where we can find evidence of hominin engagement with shoreline environments. And this has guided my work both on the Red Sea and on the Tanzanian coast so far, this hypothesis. So for hunter-gatherers living by the land, gazing at the sea, the coast would have served as a ecological hotspot, I mean the shoreline, the sea itself, and a risk buffering ecology or ecosystem. So for hominins who need to go or who need to consume and exploit aquatic resource base, they will have it, right? They will have it if they position themselves right here. So any site we find along these lines should be seen as, I think, should be integrated into this whole coastal adaptation model. Okay, so that's the line of thinking that I would like to adopt. So because when we have sites along this area, say a bunch of sites, it's just improbable that people would ignore the resource base on the coast while they can see it. So, but the only thing that matters, in my view, is if the sea is perceivable. As long as it's perceivable, it must have been accessible and must have been utilized by early humans. So not finding direct evidence of human engagement on a site should not limit our scope, our appreciation or recognition of the role of shoreline environments in hominin survival or in our evolution. There is a very interesting model that I found when I was publishing a book, an article that's titled for Journal of Quaternary Science Advances. titled like Living by the Land and Gazing at the Sea. Using my work on the Red Sea coast, I kind of published this idea, this model, how it should be seen as a plausible model to guide our work. So there is this general model of population use of patch habitats. It is driven from a study of birds, basically, but from an ecological standpoint, whatever applies to birds could apply to humans. In behavioral ecology, what matters is that does that behavior confer us benefit, all right? Any behavior that confers benefit to different species would likely also confer benefit to us. So here's the thing. So this research by Farik shows that as the detection distance increases, meaning the ability to detect any patch comfortably would pretty much trigger the species, the organisms to reach it, and there is a higher proportion of the dispersal will reach that patch, would likely reach that patch. And human ability to view and see things or detect things is pretty much unlimited unless we are inhibited by some physical barrier. So we can see anything where there is visibility. We see the stars that are how many light years away. So our ability to, if we can perceive the presence of the coast, I think the coast must have been always a part of the hominin landscape. All right, now let's come back to our main focal area. So with all these perspectives in mind, now I'd like us to talk about what is in the coastal ecozones of Eastern Africa. Like I said, there isn't much archaeology done, but it's a very interesting region. It has a very vibrant ecosystem. So it's ecozones, bunch of varieties of ecozones with ambient situation, so ambient resource base. And also, given its location, just adjacent to this fossil-rich area, it should be considered as a part of the hominin habitat, the place that hominin is engaged with and that defined and supported hominin survival fortunes. And it has all this continuous marine-bounded, channelized ambient ecosystem. That's what I was trying to get. So there are a bunch of, this whole coastline is transected by a bunch of streams and marine bays. So bay, B-A-Y. So there is a very interesting phenomenon here. So the Great Rift, while it was spreading through this part of East Africa, there are a lot of many fault lines that show that it was also trying to jump eastward, but it didn't make it. So there are a couple of places where you see all these bays that show that sometimes when the rift fails to really penetrate through that, it jumps. All right, so there is a hope. It jumps, and because there is like a huge, very thick terrestrial environment here, like Mount Kilimanjaro is right here. So you really cannot, the rift cannot pass through it. But that did not protect or prevent the rift from making an impact. So it will jump, and you can see some of these basins and channels formed along that transect of the Rift Valley propagation. So because of that, it's very, very rich in estuarine settings that are ideal for mangrove and other human-supporting resources. Unfortunately, very limited Paleolithic research or research focused on Stone Age era. For that, we have very limited record that shows shows evidence of human occupation, and that's where my work is striving to make an impact on. What is the current scope of research? Pretty much is very limited, like I mentioned it, but there are some nice, some interesting leading discoveries that helped my work, that inspired my work to some extent. And one of them is this paper by Josephine Jordan and colleagues that pretty much stated that the coastal forests of Eastern Africa provide refuge for early hominins in periods of variable climate and strong seasonality. Because it's a forest woodland environment, it is less susceptible to ecological stress during climate change or even seasonal change. So unlike grassland environments that are really susceptible to decline in resource base when a different seasons, woodland forest environments can sustain enough resource diversity, enough species diversity during different seasons, and for that reason they could have supported long-term human settlement. Okay, and so that was very instrumental paper in my work. So there exists curiosity, there is interest in this region. It's just that there hasn't been much done. And this work by Kerry Shipton, was he one of you guys? Okay, yeah, fantastic work. And Kerry did I cut that thing? Okay, so that publication is also by Kerry. Sorry, I might have cut that. But yeah, this work on the coast of Kenya also revealed this amazing record on a cave site, like I mentioned earlier, one of the only cave sites in this region that showed that early humans exploited this coastal forest environment starting around 78,000 years ago, and that is quite revealing and illuminating of the value of this region for human adaptation. And there was another work on the island of Zanzibar that also showed early humans in the later Stone Age. There are some problems with the date, but nonetheless it was revealing work. Several Tanzanian researchers documented later human occupation along the coast of Tanzania in the 1990s and early 2000s as well. So there is a potential. There was some work done. My work is not the only one that has done research there, but the region did not really receive the attention that it deserves in a broader scheme of things. So my ongoing research on the coast of Tanzania, specifically in the area called Kilwa, aims to establish the chronology, chronological, peri-environmental, and behavioral contexts of Pleistocene human settlements. Going there, discovering sites, and defining the chronology, knowing the temporal placement of the sites and the environmental context, what kind of conditions promoted human survival there, and the behavioral context. How did people adapt? What kind of behavior did they develop to make use of this landscape? So these are the three kind of research aims that I have. And this is Kilwa. It's a beautiful area. You can see here all this channelized place. It is really a beautiful, you can see the sheer number of estuaries here, these inlets that go through all this weak gradient of the landscape and form this inlet. So a landscape like this must have been like a paradise for early humans, pretty much. So this is going to be our focal site, all right? So this is Manaraeka. I'm going to be spending some time talking about the evidence that's coming from that. And for your reference, this is Kilwa Masoko, the kind of the city in the region, the administrative center of the region. And Kilwa Kisiwani is the place where there is this amazing record or reunions of the ancient Swahili city-states of Kilwa Husuni Kumba. Right? So there are just very interesting sites there, and here is one of them. So Kilwa is mostly known for this record. So this kind of interest, Neville Chittick, a prominent archaeologist, controversial sometimes, worked a lot in Kilwa and promoted Kilwa pretty much. And so it is one of the prominent, really medieval towns on the coast of East Africa, where a lot of work has been done by people from the US and the UK as well, exploring all the different dimensions of all the power, the complexity, the trade, and yeah, it's a very interesting region. So it is told the presence, the fact that such a record is present there pretty much took the attention of people to work on the site. So the prehistory is not well developed, but there is, with the current work, there is hope that we're going to really reveal the role of the coast or the coastal East Africa, specifically the Kilwa coast in hominin survival. All right, so Kilwa, the kingdom, the Sultanate of Kilwa confronted the Portuguese. So here's my collaborator, David Wright, like holding the cannon launcher of the Portuguese. So they came and pretty much they burned the town. They bombed it because the Sultanate did not give up. And so eventually they surrendered. I guess they burned it. So that's the story. Not for us today, but it's a nonetheless very interesting place to visit. So the general setting of Kilwa, I have mentioned a few of them earlier. So it's a marine bay. It's one of those marine bays that are actually aligned with pretty much with the general trajectory of the rift propagation. So it's considered to have been, along with the Pangani Rift you see like north of Dar es Salaam, this is one of those kind of residual cracks, so to speak, that were triggered by the rift itself. But the rift did not make it through. So there's huge marine bay surrounded by estuarine inlets, and the general vegetation encompasses this Miombo brachycedia and mangrove. Mangrove is very widespread and along the coast here, and mangrove is a perfect environment, favorable environment for seashells. All right, so mollusk shells that could be easily harvested without any technology. So it could provide really a resource base for early humans by virtue of being a good environment, favorable environment for this easily accessible species. And it's highly faulted area, highly faulted and uplifted. So seismically, it's unstable. And I would like to illustrate that. So our focal site, as you can see here, so if you draw like any line here and kind of map the profile, it's just a very interesting. You can see here how the fault lines really align. You have this step. So you have all this badland, so to speak, and you can see some pattern here, how the land is sinking. And so it's highly faulted. It means it is this faulting creates ecological diversity or landscape diversity. That's good for humans. Okay, so that's pretty much it. All right. Well, I would like to also show the fact that it is highly uplifted has resulted in some reef exposures, reef deposited, now being located way far inland. So in the 1990s, in fact, early 2000, there were a research group who did some mapping of the area and did a lot of geological mapping done by Johnson, I forgot the first name. So yeah, so they located this reef exposure at an elevation about 24 meters above sea level, and they dated it to somewhere around 80,000 years ago. It is impossible really for sea level to have reached this area at that point because we know that the sea level has not really risen much for the past 100,000 years. So it must have been this uplifting of this area that kind of threw this land, this elevation. So you can imagine the degree, like this area has almost uplifted, must have been uplifted close to 20 meters above sea level in the past 80, 70,000 years ago. So with that kind of change in the landscape and the topography, you can imagine how the sites that we find here could have also been displaced from their original context. So when we cite, so our lovely site, Menaraeka, you can see here it lies at about 55 meters above sea level, and according to this model, it could have been much closer to the coast in the past. Okay? So you can just subtract 20 meters or 24 meters, and we could just throw it up to 30 meters above sea level. So human engagement in this place must have involved really flexible adaptation of exploiting different habitat zones. All right, the Stone Age record in the region is not well developed, like I said, but fortunately enough, several discoveries were made at different times under different circumstances. And here are some of the localities that have so far showed presence of Stone Age record. Meaning evidence, potential evidence of prehistoric human settlement. One of them is Menaraeka, that encompasses 2 major localities within a ridge complex. And Mapimbi, right here, which was documented by our group. All this, I added a little asterisk to acknowledge some of the people who visited those sites. So Mnareka, for example, our Labla site was visited prior to my team in the 1980s by Karoma, and there is another very interesting person who made that, who revealed that site to Karoma. Then Masakasa and Ngurini were also visited by Glenn Isaac, a prominent prehistorian of African archaeology, in the 1970s at the invitation of Neville Chittick, and described some of the archaeology there as, it was very ambiguous, he was right. So as some early Stone Age, even though it doesn't look like it's early Stone Age. So there is that. So we had some kind of some starting point, some work that served as kind of as revealing the potential of the area. The interesting circumstance that kind of brought Mnareka brought to light, so to speak, occurred in late 1970s when a woman named Hesila, is that what it is? Hesila Prasad was invited by a company called Molem. Apparently it's British, right? This is a road construction company that was kind of hired, was contracted to expand this road because this area was a target of oil exploration. So, and the Tanzanian government was investing a lot in kind of making this area accessible for companies to come and invest. So they hired a geologist and working at the University of Dar es Salaam then to explore the possibility of creating this kind of tributary road to this area. And God bless her, Hesila lands right here because it's one of the only patch land where they can land. They were flying on a helicopter. So they landed right here, and she discovers this amazing material. A lot of stone tools litter this whole surface. So she was curious, and she brought a representative collection from the site and showed to Jonathan Karoma, the person that I just showed you. And so that is the backstory. That's very interesting backstory of this, behind the discovery of this site. So Hesila made it possible that these people in the archaeology department at the University of Dar es Salaam visited. Then they did some work, but unfortunately nothing was published. All right, people were a little bit pissed off with the work of Chittick at that point, with the interpretation that kind of they were not really publishing material, but there was a good report that was submitted to the archaeology department at the University of Dar es Salaam. All right, so this is backstory. So in developing this work, like I said, to connect you back to the hypothesis, leading hypothesis that I am adopting, we expect to find sites situated in near coastal strands. So that is our target place because I think that it is very unlikely that we'll find well-preserved sites now under under this kind of fluctuating, especially if the area is uplifted and constantly shifting coastal landscapes, coastal topography. Our best hope is to really look for or find sites in these near coastal places, and that's where we should really look for. Mnareka. So that is the place where my team has focused our attention for the past 2 years. But in the first season of our work in the area in 2016, we did visit most of the sites. We visited Ngurini, Masakasa, and several others. So it lies in this eroded depression. So it's an erosional depression, like a little gouge. So, and it's located for about 4.5 kilometers from the coastline, the nearest coastline. Where am I? Okay. So just for a reference, this is Kilwa Masoko, this is Kilwa Kisiwani, where we've seen all these ruins of the early Swahili states. And so here's Mnareka. So you have to take a boat all the way up to this point, and you were dispatched from this one, disembarked from the boat, and we walk for about 45 minutes to reach the site. It looks like a very nice place, but there is a lot of overgrowth. So you have to really find your way. and we have really a nice community. The community is one of the safest places. Having worked in 4 other countries, this is a place where I found like people so friendly. And yeah, I will show you. We camp there. And but before I forget, so the sedimentary history is very interesting. So it's a lateralized fine sand that you see on the surface, and it's attributed to kind of partly to marine and partly to kind of alluvial setting. So it's definitely, this area was a part of this deltaic riverine floodplain. Okay. And dense middle stone age material occurred, like you find it everywhere. Like half of these stones that you see are like artifacts. Okay? So since 2020, we start to camp there because there was no point really to go back to Masoko every day. So, and like I said, very nice community. So we just set up our tents just 100 meters from the site itself. That made it super easy and effective. Really, our time there is spent so well. We wake up at 6:30. We work until 8:30 before breakfast. Come back, eat breakfast, go there. So, and we are well fed. We have great cooks, local cooks. And the hardest part is really to transport the camp supply. So we have to dispatch all these motorcycles here to carry our stuff back to Masoko. So this is our camp life. So our field work has been focused on surface sampling of diagnostic artifacts and targeted excavation to really track the source of the artifacts that are found on the surface. Like I said, the whole surface is littered with artifacts, and you really cannot rely on the surface artifacts to interpret human behavior. So we are spending so much time excavating all the deposits that we think hold artifacts in situ, and we're finding some very exciting material. So this has been the unit that we excavated. So we excavated last summer. I don't have dates for it, but as you can see here, it's very deep. We dug it for almost 3.5 meters. And by the way, it's not super hard to dig here. It's really easy. It's not. I've been to cave sites where like you pretty much dig a concrete. So no, it's very, very. The climate has been friendly. And so it's not really tough per se. You just have to pay attention. The change in stratigraphy is what is tricky about it. You really cannot spot it as you dig. So you pretty much have to go back to the walls to define it. So here's my colleague, my collaborator, David Wright, doing all the profiling and sampling sediments for OSL dating. So we have Levallois cores coming right from here, from below 3 meters, about 3.1 meters below surface. So this was a ledge, so the shoulder of the depression, and we just sank this unit along this profile, and we're hoping that we'll find. So we had material coming from all over here, and you can see all these tubes are placed. They are meant to pretty much scoop sediments that will be dated. All right, so, and we're doing also this geomorphic prospecting, like we had to do all the sections just as kind of for prospection, like just inspect the area. If there is archaeology, then we start to do proper digging. There is that, and we're doing surface mapping, and that is pretty much it. Then here I'm going to share with you very preliminary dates based on our 2022 field season. Our 2024 field season material, we have more samples, and it's coming very soon. Unfortunately, I don't have, I think the dose rate was done, but there is some calculation that needs to be done. So the RISO Denmark, the dating is done at the RISO lab in Denmark, and we feel like very confident about the reliability of this work. And so some interesting results. We have, should I mark this? Okay, so a couple of contexts that have archaeology gave us dates ranging between 43.9 to 41. That's MIS 3. That's considered to be kind of an interglacial. Then we do have I should start with the oldest one. That should be more exciting for archaeology slide. So, all right, so we have one unit, archaeology bearing unit, that gave a date of 71,000. And the two contexts that represents MIS4, which is the beginning of a glacial episode. Then we have a context that also revealed very diagnostic LSA material dated about 10,000. So we have episodic human or intermittent episodic human occupation of the area. It was not just inhabited one episode, rather people were coming back. And this is just a sample of 4 samples. All right, this is we're just capturing human presence here out of 4 samples. And they are spread all over, showing that this is not, it cannot be a disparity. I mean, maybe there is a disparity between these dates. Maybe they might we can lump these 2 dates in one. But this date and this date and this date cannot be just anomalies. All right? Excellent. So the dated context is most of them are kind of sandy loam in varying size range. So we have fine sand, coarse sand, and extreme coarse sand. So what I wanted to show you here is the context that we dated did provide archaeology, and some of them actually constrain the upper range of the archaeology bearing context. So particularly in this context, in 2022, this is the layer that we sampled. And we had few less diagnostic artifacts coming out of it. But last year, when we went there, we dug. So that's why the 2022 study was very important as a way of laying the foundation. We just wanted to have some reference. So we dug it and were able to find this diagnostic Levallois and several diagnostic flakes. And this is the context that produced Holocene looking material, typical LSA, and this quartz dominated. And this oldest site, the oldest context, or the context that produced the oldest date, did produce artifacts that are diagnostic of being made by humans, but not diagnostic of any technological form. Okay, there is a bulb of percussion, and there are a couple of flake scars here. And again, this is like a natural exposure. So we're looking at a profile. We did not excavate this. It was a natural exposure, but once we start to find all these flakes, we were curious and we sampled it, and we got what we got. Okay, so just putting together all these dates in the broader scheme of the global temperature record. Again, there is so much variability considered here. This is very, very broad. So we're looking at generally with MIS4 and MIS stands marine isotope stages. And so we have the MSL layer. So let's start with the youngest one. So we have late Stone Age or young occupation dating about 10,000, at which point the temperature was warmer, and that correlates with higher precipitation. And MIS, but for Southern Hemisphere, like I told you, for MIS 3, and we do have human occupation. So you have in here between MIS 4 and MIS 3, you don't see a really dramatic change in temperature, so to speak. In fact, it looks like it's more warmer in the earlier in MIS 4 than MIS 3. Regardless, we're seeing like humans occupying this area at different climatic conditions. So that's super exciting. And another exciting part of this is that this MIS 4 site, or the oldest date that we found that gave at the age of 71,000, overlaps briefly with a margin of error of this the Toba supervolcanic eruption, all right? That's believed to have disrupted human biogeography, human habitat across many places, and traces of this super volcanic event are actually believed to have discovered. They've been discovered in East Africa, including South Africa. So that means we're, again, seeing humans potentially gravitating towards the coast when these disastrous events happen. So we are excited about that as well. So we do have some preliminary dates, preliminary data related to stable carbon and nitrogen isotope. I'm not going to present the nitrogen isotope. It's a little complex to interpret. But the stable carbon isotope shows that at least for the MIS3, it's more kind of 3. and you have, that's ISO isotope stage 4, ISO sample 4, sorry. And for the 71,000, we see more kind of grassy condition. So, but these are just a couple of samples. Really, they cannot reveal. They do point to something that could have been the real thing, but we are still working on adding more samples and have a better data that represents what's going on here. But it's worth mentioning that. So we're just curious to see where does this fall in relationship to Pangaea Saidi, which is a well-studied site. They have a better site preservation because it's a cave, right? So you can reliably really connect the data with the actual peri-environmental record. So they are level 9. They did find, they didn't have much isotope data, but they have like phytolith, right? The phytoliths are proxies for paleovegetation. And so that phytolith data, you can see here the dark green represents woody vegetation. So you can see, yeah, potentially Pangaea Saidi, I believe, I should have done research. It's right on the, close to the equator, right? Much closer to the equator. So, but nonetheless, it's part of this whole coastal forest environment. So you can't expect them to be super different, right? You can't really expect much difference in terms of the overall vegetation pattern between Kilwa and Pangaea Saidi. So we're excited that, yeah, during this time, we see more woody habitat. So in a nutshell, before I kind of share some data, I would like to tell you ahead that we're so excited to find some evidence of what looks like a biface, right? So last summer we ran into this hand axe, very diagnostic hand axe, but we're not sure if this is part of the MSA or if it represents a unique or its own adaptation, you know, an independent human settlement. We also have what we call Karari cores that are defined in Turkana. What Karari means that people would kind of split a core, then they use the flat surface, the fresh flat surface as a platform, and they chase. They start to remove flakes from the side. And they are kind of a common component of the early Stone Age. So combining that, you know, we're not still certain. We have to find something in context. We're really working to define the chronology of these sites. And one of these, this is one of the diagnostic Levallois core that came from that layer that I told you that lies about 3.1 meter below sea level, below surface, that we have a sample that's coming for the date. So hopefully it will be old enough. And so we have, you know, hypothetically, we just put this as a question mark. Potentially, we have an Acheulean settlement. Then definitely MSA, all right, dated to between 41 and 71,000, represented by all these diagnostic stone artifacts. But the most important thing is quartzite happens to be most dominant in this Middle Stone Age, well as in the later time, in the LSA timeline or time range, we see more quartz, people pretty much focusing on a different raw material. Are we time? Yeah, okay. Let me just move a little bit fast. So there is a high emphasis on quartzite raw material, which is local. And yeah, this is kind of an adaptation that is embedded in exploiting local resources. There are implications that I could describe, but again, the LSA material has not been analyzed yet, and I have better kind of information to share with you regarding the Middle Stone Age. So that's why I'll be just sharing a couple of slides about the general characteristics of the technology related to the MSA. So Levallois and blade core reduction schemes are common, well represented at this site, and this Levallois scheme involves splitting a core, okay, split core, and creating two cobbles, two sides, that could be easily exploited on the flat surface or fresh surface through what we call recurrent, all right? So this is an example of it. Then clastes could also be. So now people were starting to wonder if we're looking at a core, a class that served as a core, or if this would be, if you find this like in Old Gorge, you would call it like a chopper, all right? But we're a little reluctant to use that term as for now. We really have to find something in situ that could be dated. So for the time being, we're going to consider it as a part of this core reduction strategy or flaking strategy that involved pretty much removing flakes from the clast. Then another strategy was pretty much they would take an elongated clast, they split it, and they create a platform. And from that platform, they will produce elongated flakes. All right, so varieties of core reduction strategies. Most flakes retain multiple dorsal scars, representing showing repeated episodes of core reduction. So even though it's local material, people were still really exploiting. That is like intense core reduction. And this might represent potentially the presence of novice apprenticeship. All right, but it's really interesting in and of itself to see that people not having real constraint but still committed to do intensive core reduction. So these are some of the representative. You can see here this is amazing, emblematic, iconic blade flake. And these are some of the Levallois points that you see. No microlith so far, okay? No microlith. And in this one, I show some of the preliminary data that shows that there is evidence of the systematic core management by just looking at how flake production efficiency is related to different raw materials. You can see the closer, for example, quartz is closely aligned with number 1 is not super, number 1 is not the best. So number 3 is the highest scale in the flake production efficiency, and it's calculated this way using this formula. And this is rather very interesting, okay, this side, because you can see here there is more flake production efficiency associated with faceting. All right, so preparing the core, preparing or setting up a suitable platform increases actually the rate of producing more viable or serviceable flakes, meaning flakes that have longer cutting edge. Okay, longer cutting edge is the currency that archaeologists use to determine the value of or the efficiency of the technology. Okay, so settlement behavior seems to be associated with exploiting riverine deltaic floodplain. Okay, and this is our hypothesis, preliminary hypothesis. This is maybe the kind of landscape that humans were living in, like a flat deltaic, and because of that, it's a bay, all right, a huge bay, and for the past 5 million years, there used to be an active water stream coming. It just recently that all this uplifting pretty much changed the whole topographic setting of this landscape. So then afterward, this area was uplifted and creating this ridge. So now Menara Eka is on top of a ridge, all right? While I showed you earlier, remember that map. So you have a fault line on the back. And so this is our model. And so typically it is tied to terrestrial resource exploitation potentially, but with no restriction to exploiting the coastal or intertidal resources as well. So this is the best position any humans can be in. All right, so they would have access to both terrestrial and coastal resources. So humans utilize it. So our conclusion here is that humans utilize it. So you remember the theme of this whole talk is human life waste on coastal East Africa. So it looks like this peri-coastal landscape provided an ideal and appealing setting resource base for our ancestors. And so this peri-coastal areas may have been ecological hotspots on their own, but also a staging ground for foraging on the intertidal zone. So MNI, Menara Eka, it lies right on the edge, on the ridge. And from this ridge, they could, early humans could have potentially perceived the presence of the sea by sound, by vision, by enemies. So, and you can see, like, we can easily feel the ocean roaring at night. So that could pretty much give humans also a sense that there is something. So it must have really invoked this curiosity. That's why seashores are also very important in terms of providing humans this sense of curiosity about where they are and all of that. So with that, we can just see how this area must have been super important and strategic. And another point that I want to make is the reason why the sea level must have been always perceivable is because the continental shelf is super steep. So even if there is dramatic increase in sea level, the sea will not go far away. Right? It will always be visible. That's why it's a really, really good harbor, very interesting harbor. And so, in conclusion, there is this evidence shows that the coastal ecozones or coastal ecotones were important places, and people used diverse raw material types and class sizes. And the technology that we find here is very similar to most of the Middle Stone Age technology that we find in the inland. So this similarity in technology clearly shows that we're looking at more or less people who share the same culture, the same behavior, and potentially this we might be looking at people, early humans expanding, going back and forth between the coast and the inland as needed. So that relationship with the inland must have been really active. Use of diverse core reduction strategies, again, flexibility. This points to there is standardization. So the point about standardization is, it shows that people, when they do the same thing across generations, it means that there is some social learning. People were copying, imitating the technology from one another, and that shows pretty much stone tool technology must have been super important for human survival. To put people under that kind of pressure to copy shows that it was a necessity to copy it. So overall, in conclusion, the evidence points to very, very flexible adaptation. Humans utilizing different survival approaches to make life here. The broader significance of this is probably the last slide. I might have one. So the broader significance of this find is that in the context of this emergent theory about human evolution or the origin of modern humans, it has relevance, right? So it has relevance in essence. According to this emergent view, early humans are believed to have, modern humans are believed to have evolved in different core areas, It's a pan-African. Right? Different parts of the African landscapes are believed to have contributed to our evolution, to our origin. And so if it is a continent-wide process, all right, it means different ecological settings across the continent must have contributed. So, and the coastal ecozone of East Africa must have been one of those places where early modern humans pretty much appeared. So this asks us really, the whole model asks us to identify core areas where early modern humans appeared. And I feel like the evidence points to humans were living there, and if early humans lived there, it must have been one of those areas that was a key player, right, in human survival and the origin of modern humans. So in a broader scheme of things, this work is an important step towards plugging long-standing gaps. Really, it helps us expand our understanding of hominin biogeography. So hominin biogeography is the key concept here. Like we wanted to know what kind of habitat supported early humans, and this evidence shows that East African coastal environment was a part of that hominin habitat. So this complements the incomplete fossil record. For the most part, hominins researchers tend to construct hominin biogeography based on fossil evidence, which is not representative. The sites that represent or that give us fossil evidence for early humans are very, very small. The localities are very small compared to the size of Africa. So we have a lot of work that needs to be done to fill the remaining gaps. And so I'm really looking forward to find out what these dates will tell us about human adaptation. For now, thank you so much for listening. And this is what I had. So I would be happy to take questions.
So it's our convention that we don't put the speaker through the ringer of having questions from the floor. You're welcome to ask him questions in a more less hostile environment over at
No.
But I would like to invite Professor Marta Mirzanla to give us a vote of thanks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do I stay away? Yeah. Thank you.
So it's a great pleasure to say thank you to Amanuel for this fascinating third Jennifer Oppenheimer memorial lecture. I think Jennifer would have been over the moon with this lecture. So
Thank you.
It was an extraordinary journey that went from huge, what is the importance of coastlines in prehistory, to actually how they flake the stones in the MSA record, to trying to think, well, how does this fit with the biogeography of humans? So I think that there are many, many things to take home out of Amanuel's lecture. For me, it's interesting at a different, dealing with a completely different moment in human evolution. People are looking at the East African coasts, following Jonathan Kingdom's models of the coastal foragers for hominin origins, thinking that it's actually the rivers and the forests between the rift and the coast that could have been the core areas for hominin origins in the late Miocene. And all the work in Gorongos and Mozambique is now providing the beginnings of evidence for this. So actually you brought it to the other end, right? Modern humans, dispersals, obviously, Rob and I have thought a lot about dispersals along coast, and are they really linear? Are they really productive? What do they do with the water? I love the idea of the hydrostatic springs, providing new sources of fresh water, because it's one of the big issues, what you do in those coasts without the fresh water. But then actually looking at the research in a place that it looks absolutely lovely, but it's not super hospitable, not for archaeology, because it's really vegetated. Right? So it's not the most obvious place to go looking for stone tools. And yet, to know how many new sites with dates, lithics in situ, different ages, it's a feast. So, Amanuel, thank you very much indeed for this lecture, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions now with a drink. Thank you again.